Hi, my name is Mark Stallard. Welcome to Little Green Man. This is the 7th and final episode in our series of the Balanced Budget Doctrine. So, if austerity, balancing the budget, is not the answer, then what is? Well, both Lemon and Joffe, now I'll explain who those are. Charles Lemon, Director of Fiscal Studies at the Fraser Institute, which is a right-wing conservative think tank. Can you have a left-wing conservative think tank? I don't know, but conservative think tank. Mark Joffe, Director of Policy Research at California Policy Center, a US, the US little organisation there that is also right-wing. So here we go. This is what the right-wingers are saying. This is from an article in Macleans. You'll see the source in the description. Both Lemon and Joffe agree that governments should make greater efforts to run substantial surpluses during flush times and put those funds towards their capital spending and debt payments. So not austerity all the time. The right-wingers, at least these right-wingers here, are saying build up, when things are good, save that money and you can use that to pay off the debts. Not balancing the budget every step down the road, but bringing in a surplus and then paying that off. That's their solution. Now, well, I'm now going to take this a step further. I'm going to suggest that instead of pretending to run government like a business and balancing the budget, which I showed right at the very beginning of this series, is a lie. Businesses and families do not run a balanced budget. They don't even attempt to do it. So why make governments do it? Well, I'm going to turn that around. Let's actually run governments more like actual businesses actually do. Not wholly, but more like it. Let's forget about balancing the budget. Let's pretend that isn't even a thing. And then we can make every effort to run a surplus when times are good, so that we're bringing in more money than we're spending when times are good. And then when times are good, we can do exactly what those people there, or those right-wingers I quoted earlier, Lemon and Joffe, both said, and when times are good, let's start paying off that debt with some of that surplus. Absolutely, let's do that. We should then take one step further, and Mark Blythe and Richard D. Wolff and other economists have said this all along. You've got to spend when times are bad. So you can go into debt. You can go into debt to spend when times are bad. That will help stimulate the economy. I'm going to take that a little bit further. Is that if we have enough surplus and we keep some surplus there, a rainy day fund. A lot of families and businesses have a rainy day fund of sorts, and some local governments do as well. But we can have a rainy day fund. Instead of going into debt, we just use that rainy day fund that we built up during those good times, and we use that to stimulate the economy. And then maybe there'll be a little bit of a gap that we may need to borrow just a little bit to get us through the slump. So good management of public services, that's an essential. No one's arguing that isn't good. Let's get rid of trim the fat between where it needs to, but keep the regulations that keep people safe in place. Let's keep the regulations that keep people from being ripped off in place, but we can make it easier for government to get things done without making it a horrible and disastrous system. So just good management, smart management. That will provide us value for money. For our taxes. We pay your taxes and you get a good value for money in return. That we then don't cut willy-nilly. We just, cutting isn't a religion. It must have a demonstrable and proven purpose to cut. There must be a way of demonstrating that this is going to make things better and not make things worse. I'm going to jump in and say absolutely no privatization of public services. Things that people need to survive, that need to live, that benefit everybody must never ever be privatized. It must be brought in-house and stay there. No P3 partnerships, no partial funding from corporations and from rich people. All of it to be generated controlled by the private sector. Absolutely no selling off of the commons, never giving it away. So there's oil under the ground. Don't ever give it to corporations. They have to pay for it if we allow them to take it out at all. No giving away of the airwaves. They have to pay for that because that is part of us. If I want to now take on broadcasting, even just in a small area, I've got to pay for a license for it. If big companies don't have no restrictions in that area, well, the airwaves will be completely clogged, and there'll be no chance for me or even a small business wanting to jump in. That's why we have some of those laws in place. I'm not giving them away, making sure that the rents are high enough so that profits are high for the businesses, but that we are not getting ripped off as the owners of these resources and of these spaces. Governments should stop borrowing from private banks wholesale. Pay off the debt, walk away from the private banks, and borrow from your own state banks and your own financial systems instead of the private. No interest should be given to private people because they won't pay their taxes. If they don't pay a fair share of taxes, they shouldn't be getting any interest from any loans that they give to the government. So that then private citizens and private companies can be paying their fair share of taxes, and then if government needs to borrow money, they will be borrowing the money from itself, from its own state bank, controlled by the people, and benefits for the people and not for a handful of rich people. The balanced budget is a myth. Your tax dollars, in the end up in the pockets of the people who already have more than they can possibly spend. When you privatise, your tax dollars are going to them. When you still pay your taxes, but services getting cut, you're the one that ends up having to pay the price, both financially and with cut and services being cut and whittled away. So the balanced budget really is not a conspiracy theory to make rich people richer and poor people poorer. It's actually a conspiracy fact. It can be demonstrated clearly. The evidence is in. Now, will we get a fair hearing? Well, that's up to us to push those people in power. It's something that we need to push our local representatives, our MPs, our MLAs, and we need to push for them to look after the public sector, to look after the commons, those things and those areas that belong to us, the people. Balance the budget not only is the wrong way to go, it is absolutely disastrous, and it will lead us to absolute and abject ruin. Let's use some common sense. It hasn't worked for 40 years. Let's change our tactics. Little Green Man.